Hey, entrepreneurs. I'm going to give you an overview of week two. This is where we really get into the content of our course. This entire class is based on the design thinking process. A lot of entrepreneurs come up with a great idea and they send that idea out to market without going through an actual creative thinking and problem solving process. And that can lead them to a lot of issues down the road. So, we're going to start at the very beginning with something called design thinking. And I want to introduce you to that in this week. Design thinking is, as you see here, a process that consists of five steps. Designers use this to organize their information and find meaningful and successful solutions to a problem. The five steps here are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And if you want a little bit more information about Cameron Brown and Career Foundry, go ahead and click on this link in the slide to an article that takes you to a summary of how he's using design thinking in his day to day life. There's a great video here in the slides that I don't want to show you now, so I'm going to have to work my way around this here. There we go. So those five steps again. Empathize. This is a point that a lot of people skip right over, but it's critical for really understanding the problems that a user is facing. To properly develop empathy, we have to have interviews with people, ask them the right questions. We have to observe them in their day to day lives or interacting in a situation where they experience a problem so we can see how they encounter the problem and how that makes them feel. From there, we can define the problem. Sometimes if we don't properly define the issue, we're not going to be able to actually solve it. So once we define the problem, we go on to ideate. And when we ideate, we come up with all kinds of possible solutions. We're just brainstorming. Some ideas are going to be wild and wacky, some are going to be incredibly obvious, some might be unattainable, some might be things you can simply try today. A wide variety of problems during this ideate stage, and it tends to lead us toward really good solutions. Once we identify a solution or two, we move into the prototype and testing stage. They tend to go hand in hand. We won't know if a business idea really solves a person's problems and makes their lives better if we don't put a prototype into their hands or work with them through a mock experience if we're making a service, perhaps instead of a product. So, prototyping early and often is a fantastic way just to make sure you're on the right track. We learn a ton during the prototype and testing stages in the design thinking process. And to be really honest with you, we don't usually get it right on the first try. When we're prototyping and testing, we have to make a lot of changes. The value of design thinking for entrepreneurs is that it helps them ensure they have a good idea when they bring it to market. Many entrepreneurs skip this whole process, in which case they end up with a solution that doesn't actually solve a problem, doesn't make anyone's life better, and isn't really meeting the needs of a target market. If we back up a little bit and go through this design thinking process, we end up with a much better, higher quality solution in business. Design thinking can be done in the beginning of an entrepreneurial venture when you start a company, but it's also something that can be done regularly throughout a company's life cycle. If you're introducing a new product or testing something different in your business, design thinking is a great tool to use. We've talked about design thinking from five steps. We'll actually use a tool called Design for Delight. It's from the Intuit company, and it takes those five steps of design thinking and combines them into three. So we'll mostly use these three steps of developing deep customer empathy. That's obviously the empathize stage. Go broad to go narrow. That's where we ideate. And rapid experiments with customers. That's prototyping and testing. So we're going to just condense those five steps down to three. Some great things you can do to get in the right frame of mind. If we were in a classroom, we'd do this together. But imagine you're party planning with somebody and you're using a closed off mindset where they come up with an idea and you say, yes, but say, well, let's have streamers. Yes, but streamers are hard to find this time of year, as an example. You're not going to get very far. But if you shift your mindset and your words, and instead of saying yes, but you say yes And we tend to be able to build off of each other's ideas and each other's creativity and end up with a much better product. So try this with somebody in your life as you're having conversations. Instead of yes, but flip your language and try yes, and see where that takes you. A little bit more about design for delight in these three stages. We have a lot of issues in life. And if you look at this image, you're seeing somebody walking. They've got a backpack, they're not really necessarily wearing sporty shoes or clothes. They're probably not out for exercise. They're probably trying to get from point A to point B. We could have all kinds of issues here. Number one, I don't see a sidewalk, so this might not be very safe, particularly if it's dark or in snowy conditions. That's just one quick example of an issue we could see here. So there are a lot of designed solutions. They could take a bike, they could take a cab. Everything in our world is designed. However, not every design is good. So if you see some of these things, like this pencil that as you sharpen it, goes from too cool to do drugs down to cool to do drugs or do drugs, you'll see how these really weren't properly thought out. If you remember the Miss Universe 2015 issue, where the announcer actually announced the wrong person as the winner because the card was poorly designed. And you'll see some other examples here of poor designs. It's our job to design a better world. And a traditional way to do that is, as you see here, a very linear approach, experiencing a problem, thinking of a way to solve it, building a solution, and then trying to sell that solution. Very linear, not always successful. The design thinking approach is actually circular, where we start with the customer's problem, not ours, and come up with a ton of ways to solve it. And then we test and we repeat the process. When we test, we put those possible solutions right back into the hands of our customers and get their feedback. And then we try it all over again because we basically never get it right on the first time. One example of design thinking would be this MRI machine. If you've ever had an MRI, you know that you have to lay very still for a long period of time inside a machine that's fairly enclosed. This can be an uncomfortable process for anyone, including adults, but especially for children. So if you look at this MRI machine, they went and spoke to the kids and tried to figure out stories that they can tell these kids to get them to be not afraid of the machine or the procedure, to be active participants, to be still, and to enjoy the process. And ultimately, it worked much more effectively in getting kids to hold still for their MRIs and not move and wiggle, not be scared, which delays the process, drags it out, and ultimately doesn't give them the best imaging. Design for delight and design thinking, rather than that linear process I showed you, is actually like this. It's a big jumbled mess. And when you're in the middle of it, as you will be in this class, it feels awkward. It feels uncomfortable. It feels like you're not really working toward a solution. That is normal, and I wanna say that now, and we'll emphasize it again along the road as we continue in our design thinking processes. We'll have multiple opportunities to practice this and to test it out in our class. So if it feels a little weird to you, that's just part of it. Embrace that uncertainty and keep pushing through, talking to users and setting up your interviews, and you'll ultimately end up with a clear solution at the end. And so I just want to zip through some of these slides as you'll have some time to reflect on them personally and give you some examples of things that students have come up with for this design thinking process. Prosthetics for animals, stress balls that help people with anxiety to relax and reduce their stress, and different social networking apps on smartphones. Please watch this video about Design for Delight with what's called Team Stria. So watch this video. It's all about how these students use the design thinking process to help a target population, which was blind people. So please watch this video. And essentially, you're going to be doing all these things in the process, observing users, building solutions, testing them, and presenting your final product. I do expect you to work on your design thinking mindset, saying yes and building on ideas. You can work with people that are in the class and you can also work with people outside of the class. This is not meant to be a standalone single process. Please work with others, even if it's friends and family members that aren't in the class. You'll find a lot of creativity comes from those collaborations. And also have a beginner's mindset. You might be analyzing a problem that you're familiar with already. We want to treat it like it's brand new to us and get rid of our assumptions. So that's it, guys. Your assignments for the week: Ice House Chapter 1, read and make a voice thread comment. I can't emphasize enough the importance of referencing the reading in your comments. Please make video comments or audio. The text is okay, but it's much more interactive if you're commenting by video or by audio. And then you're going to look at this good kitchen story in Blackboard. I'll reflect on those 5 design thinking steps, and you're going to explain which of the 5 design thinking steps you think is most important to the process. There's no right or wrong answer. You might find some similarities and differences between your answers and your classmates. Ultimately, we're going to have this as a discussion post. So reflect on design thinking, see how it relates to the good kitchen, and have a nice discussion with your classmates. Thanks so much.